we talked about a lot of the influences and the kind of culture behind this piece. But obviously the kind of big one is mother courage. And so I'm kind of wondering what made you want to approach that specific play and then kind of riff on it in your own voice?
That's a great question because honestly, like, I can't believe that I chose like a Brechtian play. Like, that is just like, oh my gosh, like, am I like a high school drama teacher? I don't know. So that was also like where where I was also coming from. I was watching a lot of things and I was like, oh, all these film bros are really obsessed with alienation. And I'm like, oh, and they like always will be referencing like Brecht. And like when I was like learning about alienation and sort of the concept of like showing that this is a play, like I'm just like obsessed with that in general. And just like but I don't really feel like I understood like sort of like why I was so obsessed with that kind of thing and like what is sort of interesting to me about like presentational aesthetics and sort of like disembodying it to like some extent. I really didn't know anything about Canterbury Tales. Like it wasn't something I had to like read in high school or anything. I was like, oh, I forgot this idea of a pilgrimage. So I think I sort of actually started with that mixed with like alienation and Brecht and like looking at this sort of pilgrimage connected to religion and looking at how religion is so connected in these Brecht worlds. And plot of To Wong Foo, plot of Mother Courage, pilgrimage all have this thing, which is a group of people going from one place to another in order to search for something against like really wild circumstances that usually involve like being like really far away from what you sort of know. And it's why we're obsessed with like road trip movies, Crossroads and like Thelma and Louise and Our Brother Art Thou, like all these pilgrimage movies. When I like remembered Mother Courage, like I didn't remember it as like the play about war. Like that's like what it is to me is like a play about Katrin. I don't know. I've heard both. For me, it's about her. For me, it's about like she's always the character I like related to in that story. And also with Mother Courage, like she's like who, and I think Swiss cheese too, because like Swiss cheese is like a queer icon in my opinion. The thing that I feel like has really connected me to what Katrina's not speaking look like is that, you know, she is the character that is obsessed with meditation, that is obsessed with sort of getting stoned for a really long time and wandering away, having these sort of like daydreamy moments. A lot of the reason I feel like I've had to start meditating so intensely is because social media has been so crazy in like the world and just being on like, and that's been such a big reason of my anxiety. And I definitely like see that in a lot of ways. And like a lot of what this play period comments on is like people going through a lot of anxiety and people dealing with it. The, you know, the opening image of it is like this, you know, this drag family that's all trans and non-binary coming into a town from the city where the club that they were working at got completely like gentrified and like destroyed. I think there's this sort of idea that we go into theater and it's the sort of like image of it is people carrying like tons of suitcases and people carrying tons of stuff and like setting it up, especially the way it's done with drag. I think the way it's done with nightlife period and the way it's done with drag, it's like, it's literal Mother Courage, like coming in with her like crew of people. It's very The Visit too. That's also like big inspiration for me of what I like the imagined Mother Courage is.
I saw Mother Courage when I was 16 years old. Theater of the Alienation did not work on me because I left sobbing that theater uncontrollably. Like I literally was like a fucking mess. Because there are multiple adaptations of Mother Courage or translations of Mother Courage, and I became obsessed with the David Hare adaptation. Very British. My first introduction to Brecht was then working with the actors from that production and like them being like, this is what Brecht is. And I was like, I still don't get it, but I think it's cool. Alienation is such a weird thing, but I think everything you're saying about nightlife, it feels like that. The modern version of Brecht is nightlife, is drag queens at Smart Bar, at all these places that we know and frequent, doing, like, you're in a bar, people are trashed, people are drunk, people are screaming, and they're still doing whatever the fuck they want to do, but you know you're watching drag.
I'm just obsessed with sort of the machinations of theater, and like I feel like Brecht is so much of that, and so much of like what everyone is trying to get rid of is like painted sets is like what everyone's trying to get rid of. And I'm like, I feel like when people think about plays, they think about that. And they also think about the weird costumes in Mother Courage. Like that's what I think about is like weird, like trousers that you found in like a community theater. And like,
I think one of the cool things that we've discussed briefly, and on my other hat as a casting person, is that you really want to use actual like nightlife performers in this show versus using actors, which I think is a really cool idea.
I think there's something that non-actors do, how people can just connect in other ways to stuff. That being said, I think it's really amazing when actors and non-actors work together, because I think it makes such an amazing sort of like, I think nightlife performers, for example, they have such a different expertise in performance, so they are performers in other ways. People love to other drag queens, and like, I don't know. But that being said, I'm like talking about this as like a not drag queen. And I think that's also a whole nother conversation. Maybe not for right now, but I think it's like, I'm also definitely acknowledging that I'm not necessarily like, this is a play about trans women. And I think like one of the reasons I'm obsessed with To Wong Foo is that they never take off their drag. So they're like going to bed in drag and like waking up in drag. Like they're functioning as trans women, and like everyone's being lumped into the same category as, or like the ways that fluidity existed in ways that wasn't called out as fluidity at the time was like, I feel like as much as it is today, I guess.
The one time you see someone putting on the drag is the very beginning of the film, and it's Patrick Swayze. And then after that, there's no, in these drag films, the ceremony, this like kind of ritual of the drag queen putting on her clothes and then like shedding them. And that shedding never happens. But I'm also wondering kind of like what other things in your brain kind of pull out, because you've also got this passion play aspect to it that is also really interesting, that goes back to the traveling theater people and passion plays kind of being the original traveling theater company.
I've always been obsessed with passion plays. I had a really good professor in school. I took a medieval theater class and like was like gagged at how much stuff is like taken from medieval theater, and how much literally like, you know, nowadays what that looks like, it could look like, in some ways we could be like, this is the Nicole Kidman doing it. But in other ways, it's like, no, this is like literally a plumber doing it, because it was literally like, you know, the guilds that were fucking doing this. But I think that's what's so amazing again, and why it connects to drag, is that like, that's the sort of idea that drag queens never sort of thought that they would see the day of being like looked at as celebrities and looked at in this new way. And it's been such a different, and I think trans women too, I think we've never seen this moment, you know, and like, and forgive this if this is gonna sound dramatic, but like, this was also during the time where you'd be throwing tomatoes on the stage. And this is like, I don't know, that just feels really real. Not saying that people are throwing tomatoes at me, like, oh, like what I'm doing shit, but like I'm just so obsessed with these like modern day trolls, modern day thing, like what the modern day crucifixions are, what the modern day gospel is. Because it's not Jesus, it's many things. I'm like, it's Kim Kardashian. The gospel of Kim Kardashian. That section is going to get on conservative religious TikTok of me being like, Jesus is not the gospel. And I'm going to be like, God, like, yikes. Sorry, I should be like my FBI agent's like typing away furiously.